This is a short video on introductions and conclusions 3. Last week we talked about argumentative body paragraphs and I asked you to read a handout. Here's another way to think about it. An argumentative body paragraph looks like a right side up triangle. It begins more narrow with the argumentative topic sentence or subclaim that relates to the main claim or thesis. And then it continues with evidence from a source or a specific example and response to that evidence, or what is significant about this evidence in terms of the subclaim's argument. You should have at least 2 examples of evidence or specific examples in most argumentative paragraphs, and response to evidence should always follow that. So for example, you would not want to end an argumentative body paragraph in a quote from a source. You always want to begin an argumentative body paragraph with your writer's voice or the argumentative topic sentence and end it with response to the evidence, which is also your voice. Another thing to think about is that word argumentative. Argumentative essentially means persuasive, and that's the genre that we often think about. But the argumentative topic sentence is important. I often use this really silly example. If I begin a paragraph and I say, my dog has black and white spots, that's a fact, and it doesn't give me anywhere to go, nor does it help me develop an argument for the reader to guide the reader through my argument. But if I say something like, my dog has black and white spots, and her white spots reflect the sun and keep her from getting cancer, yes, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever, but I could find evidence, probably not, but I could find evidence and support it. At the end of the day, for the first example of the argumentative topic sentence, you don't have an argument with it either way as the reader. The second one, immediately you would say, what? Or and that tells you that there's an argument. So introductions are really the opposite of argumentative body paragraphs in their structure. They begin broad and end up being more narrow as you go. Remember that in the English education articles that we've been reading, introductions are much longer than the regular 1-paragraph introduction in a composition paper. So keep this in mind, that your introduction, you have a lot of space to narrate information here and to give a lot of context. I like to think about introductions in this way, CPR, or context, problem, response. And by the way, the CPR formula also works really well if you're ever assigned to write an abstract for a piece. So just keep that in the back of your mind. So you're going to want to begin with your introduction with context. For example, one of the articles we read talked about Henrietta Lacks and the book that Rebecca Skloot wrote about Henrietta Lacks and gave a lot of information about that. One of the articles that we read talked about the development of her teaching writing philosophy over time. All of the articles that we've read narrate something in the beginning, either a teaching or learning moment or some kind of story about an artifact or something that gets us into the significance of the piece. For you, you might think back to Project 1, where you narrated teaching and learning memories. Perhaps there's a memory that stands out and relates to how you plan to teach this project, how you plan to teach a standard through this project, that would help to guide the reader into your thinking. Perhaps a few of you in your team work together and narrate multiple memories or connections between your memories. Perhaps you have a story about the artifact or about another observation during a CED assignment, or about a practice teaching moment during a CED assignment or another teaching moment. Any of these things would get us in with context. You essentially tell a story. The next thing you want to do is identify a problem. And problem isn't necessarily a dire problem. It can be an observation that you've had about teaching and learning in some way. Something that maybe you want to identify to extend upon current ways of thinking about it or to look at it in a different way. And then you'll end at that point at the bottom of the triangle in your thesis or main claim, which answers how your teaching will address the problem in context. You want to tie all of these pieces together, and you want to articulate this very clearly in the final sentences of your introduction. Usually these are about 2 sentences, maybe 1 sentence, most 3. You'll be completing the Amazing Thesis worksheet this week as well, and that'll help you think about that thesis. So conclusions are the right side up triangle in terms of shape again, but they vary a bit. So there's a little more flexibility with how you set up your conclusion. In an English education type article, you may have noticed this first point, keep it short. Most of these conclusions are about 1 paragraph, 3 to 5 sentences. There was one that had the call to action that was much longer, about a page, but for the most part, they're very short. The second thing you want to do is leave the reader with a takeaway. Ask yourself, what is significant about how your teaching of this artifact addresses ELA standards in a way that best engages students? And the third thing that you want to think about that makes an exemplary conclusion is making connections. How could you link back to the introduction or an earlier observation earlier in the article or the earliest sections of the work in some way to kind of create a full circle connection in your article? As always, please email me with any questions about this presentation or Project 3 in general, or anything about the course in general, and I look forward to our virtual conferences very soon.